Hey guys, Ash here. Before I get started, I'd like to throw out a quick disclaimer for my review of Stella Glow. Because I don't have the hardware to capture 3DS footage myself, the footage you are about to see in this review is not GameXplain's. Instead, fellow YouTuber zenarrkheim graciously gave us permission to use their footage of the Stella Glow demo instead. Naturally, this means that the footage in this review is only from the opening portions of the game and will not necessarily match up with what I'm saying in the review. We apologize for the inconvenience and would like to thank zenarrkheim again for letting us use their footage. You can find links to their YouTube channel and Twitter in the description below. After you're done watching this review, make sure to go check out zenarrkheim's awesome gaming content as well. Now, on to the review. In a bittersweet and slightly romantic way, the release of Stella Glow represents the end of a full-circle journey for Japanese developer Image Epoch. The company's first game was Luminous Arc, a well-received turn-based strategy RPG released in 2007 for the Nintendo DS, so it's fitting that Image Epoch's last game is Stella Glow, another turn-based strategy RPG for the 3DS. Sadly, mounting debt and fizzling sales forced Image Epoch to file for bankruptcy earlier this year, so Stella Glow is indeed the developer's final hurrah. Stella Glow takes place in the kingdom of Regnan and thrusts you into the role of Alto, a friendly young man whose idyllic village life with his close friend Lisette is turned upside down when Hilda, the Witch of Destruction, suddenly shows up and sings her Song of Ruin, encasing his hometown and its residents in crystal. Following this tragedy, Alto and Lisette are drafted into the 9th Regiment of the Royal Knights of Regnan and embark on a quest to stop Hilda. Naturally though, Alto and friends come to learn that all is not as it seems and things aren't quite so black and white. If that sounds like a fairly generic setup for a JRPG story, well, that's because it is. There's very little in Stella Glow's story that hasn't been done before. There are a couple of big plot twists later in the game that are genuinely surprising, but in general, Stella Glow probably isn't going to be winning any awards for its story. That said, even if you may have seen a lot of its individual elements before in other RPG stories, Stella Glow's narrative is engaging nonetheless. It moves along at a snappy pace, there's very little if any filler, and most of all, Stella Glow has an incredibly charming, likable, and well-written cast of characters that transform an otherwise fairly standard story into something a little more special. Speaking of the characters, they fulfill all sorts of standard anime tropes, such as the love interest whose cooking never turns out quite right and the freewheeling womanizer hiding a tragic past. But this hardly matters, because the characters are all so sharply written and expertly voiced that they endear themselves to you almost instantly. Each character also undergoes an appreciable amount of consistent character development, both in the main story and in the optional bonding events you can pursue with each of them individually. Stella Glow's characters are undoubtedly one of its strongest assets, and their genuine natural interactions with one another bring levity and laughter to what is otherwise a fairly heavy story. The villains are slightly less memorable and come off as a bit one-dimensional and inconsistently written compared to the good guys, but they still make for a fine rogues gallery and facing off with them is always enjoyable. The heart of Stella Glow's gameplay lies in its turn-based combat, which takes place on isometric grid-style maps. If you've played games like Final Fantasy Tactics and especially Fire Emblem Awakening, you know exactly what kind of gameplay to expect here. Careful planning and thoughtful placement of your units is necessary to achieve victory in battle, and unless you're over-leveled, taking an all-guns-blazing approach without any regard for your character's safety or vulnerabilities is a fairly certain way to arrive at the game over screen. Small things like the properties and height of different terrain and the direction from which a unit is attacked can make all the difference. Units attacked from behind, for instance, take a lot more damage and can't deliver a counterattack, so you always want to take great pains not to leave your unit's backs exposed to any enemies. This is just one example of the various factors you need to consider to survive in Stella Glow. Like any good strategy RPG, Stella Glow provides you with all the information you need to succeed in battle. A row of ally and enemy portraits at the bottom of the 3DS's top screen displays the order of the next 10 turns in battle, which is important when deciding what your current priorities are. If one of your units is in critical condition, for example, it's useful to be able to know at a glance which enemies near them pose an imminent threat and how soon your healer's next turn is coming up. Of course, this is all pretty standard fare for battle systems like this. Unique to Stella Glow, however, are the witches who join your party throughout the story and the powerful song magic they alone can use. Instead of traditional magic points, song magic is governed by a meter in the top left corner of the 3DS's top screen that charges slightly every time you damage or take damage from an enemy unit. This meter can be charged up to 5 levels, with more powerful song magic naturally requiring more charges to use. Witches can use basic song magic on their own, and it usually has effects like buffing or debuffing units over a wide area of effect around the witch, but Alto has the ability to bring out a witch's most powerful song magic by standing next to them and conducting them. Using conduction magic is worth the time and effort it takes to set up, as it overwhelmingly turns the tide of battle in your favor, and I do mean overwhelmingly. Conduction magic can have effects like completely healing every ally at the start of each turn, or preventing enemies from acting altogether for several turns. The song and conduction magic mechanics are executed well and help give Stella Glow its own identity amid the other strategy RPG offerings on the 3DS. The battle system is not without problems, however. For one, whether it's by accident or design, the enemy AI too often fails to capitalize on your mistakes. There were many times I made strategic blunders that clearly left one or more of my characters in compromising positions, and it would have been easy for nearby enemy units to punish me for that by taking them out, but they often didn't, choosing instead to target a character with full HP or sometimes not even act at all. Stella Glow isn't a particularly punishing game to begin with aside from some isolated difficulty spikes, but the persistent feeling that the AI was either too stupid or too forgiving to punish me for my mistakes sometimes made battles feel too safe. Some maps also have rather frustrating layouts that make it far too difficult for characters with a low movement attribute to get anywhere, but you won't know that until you've brought that character into the battle, at which point it's too late. It's frustrating to have a character miss out on gaining experience points throughout an entire battle just because the terrain prevents them from getting anywhere. Lastly, battles feel just a bit too slow and chunky in general and would benefit from being a bit snappier. This is just one example, but when using song magic to buff several units at once, the game forces you to wait and watch while the same buff methodically happens to each unit one by one. This persistent feeling of general clunkiness in the battles does add up, and it often left me wishing that the game would just hurry up already. Outside of battle, the proceedings in Stella Glow are divided into units of time called mission time and free time. During mission time, you travel to new destinations on the world map and take part in battles that advance the story. You can also take on free missions during this time, which are essentially random battles that pop up in locations you've already been to, allowing you to grind out some experience and boost your characters a couple of levels if you're having trouble with the required story battle. Mission time lasts for as long as it takes for you to clear the next story battle, and you're free to play random battles and grind for levels for as long as you want, though grinding is usually not necessary thanks to the game's average difficulty curve. During free time, you're confined to the hub city of Lambert and cannot take part in random battles, but there are several useful and fun ways to spend your time nonetheless. Hanging out with characters at the Night Barracks advances Alto's relationships with them, and the closer he becomes to his various allies, the more abilities and passive effects they will gain in battle. When spending time with the witches though, you'll occasionally hit roadblocks in the form of chains on their heart that only Alto can perceive. When this happens, your relationship progress with them is halted until you head to the tuning hall to tune the witch. This entails diving into the witch's heart in order to help them work out whatever emotional issue or anxiety is causing them to close themselves off to Alto. This is where the game's dating sim elements come into play, and there's obvious sexual innuendo when it comes to the act of tuning a witch, but fortunately, things rarely if ever veer into creepy or voyeuristic territory. It's also quite entertaining to see Alto get flustered as his relationships with the witches advance and things get more and more awkward. Stella Glow is a strictly linear game with very little in the way of exploration or character customization. The various locations the party travels to are presented as static images, and even the hub city of Lambert is navigated via a series of menus laid over an illustration of each area. Characters generally can't be customized beyond their basic equipment. The only exception to this are various orbs you can attach to a character's weapon that have effects like further enhancing a character's stats, or adding things like poison or an elemental attribute to their attacks. This linearity and lack of character customization are deliberate, and for me it's a point in the game's favor. But if highly linear progression and a general lack of customization are turn-offs for you, Stella Glow probably isn't going to be your cup of tea. The character designs and overall art style in Stella Glow are fantastic and help ensure that you won't get tired of looking at the same character portraits over and over again. Unfortunately, the game's graphics are somewhat bland and don't do the fantastic art any sort of justice. Battle maps, environments, and character models just look very basic, and while the game does support stereoscopic 3D, the effect is so slight that you may as well leave it off. Simply put, Stella Glow has some amazing art, but in a technical sense, there are many better looking 3DS games out there. The soundtrack, on the other hand, is generally pretty strong and complements the game well. The J-pop songs that play when Alto conducts a witch are infectious, and the music remains catchy and appropriate throughout the whole game even if it isn't quite amazing. As stated before, the voice acting is top-notch and goes a long way toward making the characters incredibly endearing. The natural line delivery and conversations makes the characters and their friendships feel real and genuine. Because Stella Glow is Imagipok's final title, it would be especially disappointing if it turned out to be a mediocre or poor game. Thankfully, this is not the case. While it doesn't exactly break new ground for the genre and the game isn't without its problems, I like Stella Glow. It delivers a solid strategy RPG experience and punctuates that with an engaging, well-paced story that shines thanks to a genuinely likable cast of characters. Thanks for watching, and if you like this review, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, keep it on GameXplain for more on Stella Glow and all things gaming.